All right, we are back from break, and we are joined with friend of the show, Jordan Clark. You've been on the show several times to talk about comics, but we've got a lot more to talk about today, obviously. And Brian, this is your guest of the day, so take it
Oh,
away.
I will. Thank you. Hey, Jordan. Thanks for joining us.
Hey,
I mean, it's always fun to have friends on the show that have done uh, cool things that I think it's important to highlight. And right now, with this national moment that is occurring, um, I mean, you've been just very active on the social medias. You are a comic book writer. You posted a comic that I just wanted to highlight, uh, called The Black Experience. Tell us a little bit about it and kind of yeah. I mean, just tell us about it to begin with.
yeah, it was a comic that I did a few years ago, about 3 years ago now, and it was just like I was trying to figure out, just kind of different things that I could do because up until that point, I had been doing some self-published stuff and then like a little bit of published stuff here and then, but I wanted to do a series of kind of shorter comics, and I also just wanted to do stuff that felt more natural to me, and kind of spoke to some of the things that I was seeing. And so I made this comic called The Black Experience with Amara Smith, and basically it takes the form of like a virtual reality game. So I mean, I don't know if virtual reality is still a thing like it was maybe
I was playing my
a
virtual
year or
boy
two.
last night.
Yeah. So I mean, people still, there's still definitely a push for it, and it's a thing that I think people are still into. But at that time, like virtual reality was like coming out strong again after, I don't know, like 20 years of not being a thing.
I feel like
Uh
it was a thing in the 90s and then a big push for it, like with Oculus and all this.
yeah.
And yeah, you're totally right. Like 3 years ago, it was like, oh, it's the next thing. We're all going to, in fact, we had a guest on the show
We did.
who has a virtual reality company and they're still around.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like it went away, but I think it just kind of, it became more of like a video game thing than I think like a thing that was going to be used for all these other purposes that people were thinking of. Um, but I wanted to use that kind of backdrop to tell the story about just like everyday life, for Black people in America, and just kind of just the general experience of it all, and frame it in a way where, you know it's like it's kind of like certain video games like Mass Effect, or the games that have like the text tree where you have all these different dialogue options of like what you could do or say in any given moment. um but some of the thoughts that, as a Black person, you kind of have to process quickly on a day-to-day basis, whether or not, okay, so if I wear this outfit, how are people going to perceive me when I go outside? Or, is that person crossing the street because they actually needed to cross the street, or because they don't want to walk by me? Or, did I, when I ordered my coffee at Starbucks, was I too loud? Did people feel threatened by me? Or all these just small little things that I think, people think about racism in a big wide context of just like it's overt and it's happening to you, and like, somebody's burning a cross on your lawn, or
Right.
these, but so much of it is just kind of the microaggressions in the day to day, even now, right? Like the beginning of the comic starts with you, the reader, wake up, and somebody has sent you, this story about this Black child that is arrested by the police, which is a real thing in Chicago. 3 years ago, like cops rolled up on this 12-year-old, and like three or four of them like arrested him for really no reason, for like a false reason. But there's pictures of him being like pushed up against, the police car and all this stuff. And every day, sometimes you kind of wake up and like sometimes there's just something on your Twitter feed or your Facebook feed that you're just like, oh, okay. So I can either process this and go on with my day, or like just shut it down. So that's kind of where all of that came from. And then a little bit, I'll spoil the ending a little bit, but it turns out that, this whole thing's being done by a white person in like a Best Buy. And they've like, gone through this whole experience, and their response to it is like, well, I read Between the World and Me, and that's not really, what what I think is true. And, it's this idea that even, you see it, right? Like all these videos, even, before George Floyd, like, people before, cell phones were like, well, I don't know if I really believe all that happened to you. And then now you're seeing it on cell phones, and people are like, well, what happened before you shot the video? Because
Yeah,
like, there's got to be a reason that this is happening.
They require like the 18 hours of footage leading up to the event, and they need to know the rap sheet of the person and this and that and the other. It's such nonsense, and I'm fucking sick of it. Like it just happening over and over and over and over.
And I think what's interesting is the denial of the fact when, I mean, I was about to say Larry King. 1992.
Rodney King.
Rodney King, thank you.
Larry, be a different
don't do
story. Larry
drugs,
King
kids.
got beat by cops.
I would almost like to see that. Yeah, but Rodney King in 1992, and even the Rodney King thing is not. That was no one thought it was new then.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I think one of the things that you touched upon that I found the most interesting is, and I think what people are really coming to grips with right now, is how it is the little things. It is not the, it's not the cross burnings. It's those little interactions during the day that, I mean, we as white people don't even think about, that people of color have to think about all the time. I put a lot of thought into whether or not I should even text you and be like, hey, you want to come on and talk about it? Because it's like, it's not your responsibility, right? But you had created this thing, and I wanted to highlight it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely appreciate it. I think a lot of Black people, specifically creative Black people, are in a very strange space right now because, there's everybody's looking at us now. Like we're in a fishbowl, and people are asking us all kinds of questions, and want to get our opinions. Where 2 months ago, like nobody gave a shit. Like there was really a lot of like, hey, what do you think about this? And so I think there's definitely a couple of sides to it in terms of, obviously it's important for our voices to be heard, and it's important for us to speak. I think it's also important for us to have the option to not speak and just say, look, man, I'm tired. Like it's been a lot. And I think we're all kind of running that gamut of, just before, this whole week I was angry and upset and just really trying to process a lot of stuff. This literally just like yesterday and coming in today, I don't want to say I've necessarily turned a corner. Like I'm still feeling all those things, but I think I'm finding more ways to be constructive with that energy, and putting it into different things, which is it's a good feeling. But I think it's always going to be there. Those emotions kind of just under the surface. And it's a really intense time. There's a lot of really intense things going on, and just a lot of strange things going on, like reading a lot of corporate statements where you're just like, I don't even know what I saw. One for Gushers yesterday, of all things, that was not only phrased in a way that just made no sense in terms of them talking about seeing and hearing Black voices, and then working on creating a space and promising there's more to come. And I'm like, you make fruit snacks. Like, I don't know.
Maybe the juicy filling is anti-racism. We don't know.
Yeah, I have no idea. And it's like, great. I think I look at a lot of these things and I say, that's great. I'm glad you are denouncing these things. Although, again, in the moment, even somebody like Taylor Swift, where it's just like, I don't want to come out and be cynical about you taking a stand and using your platform, but also like you weren't not keen on white supremacists giving you money a few months ago.
Mhm.
So, like now it's when it's easiest to have this stance, I don't necessarily discount people for taking it, but you just wonder sometimes whether it's in earnest, and whether it's because specifically now, great gushers that you've been bold enough to say these things, but
So brave.
also where's the money? You've got gushers money, like put some of that money into, like,
Pretty sure it's General Mills. They've got it
right,
right.
right. Well, you can put some of that money towards food inequity, or you can put some of that money towards, like, uh, bail funds, or feeding protesters, or like all kinds of things that you could do. So,
Well,
empty
and
platitudes are, yeah,
I think it's interesting that we brought up Ben and Jerry's earlier because they are one of those companies that has always donated. It's easy to say Ben and Jerry's. You hippie Jews. This is kind of the way you've always been. I believe you.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
they've always backed it up, and also I'm waiting for the statement from Dunkaroos on this whole issue.
Yeah, no, I'm anticipating that we're gonna hit bottom. Like we're gonna get to the most inane company or product coming out and denouncing racism.
Well, then I
Or
invite you to look at Slim Jim's Instagram account.
Right.
yeah, I'm also anticipating like a very cringe, "We Are the World" kind of song, or like, I don't know if you guys remember if you guys remember the "Accidental Racist" song with LL Cool J and like some country singer from a
Yeah.
few years ago that was just like, wow, what
Dolly
was
Parton and Nicki Minaj uniting for Ebony and Ivory.
yeah, I'm not putting it past anybody.
I think we were overdue for one of those songs because of coronavirus anyway. But yeah, now that we're in this moment, I'm not saying synergy, but I am saying synergy.
Called Pandemics 2020.
Yeah,
The virus and
Pandemic,
racism.
end of racism, pandemic mashup.
yeah,
It's the number one selling single of 2020. Sold 20 copies. No one buys singles anymore. I thought your Twitter presence, your Facebook posts have also been pretty great. James Baldwin is a name that I've always known, but you've sent me in search of more about him, his quotes, his essays. That's a powerful dude. His stuff on the role of an artist in a society is really, really interesting stuff.
yeah, and I think he's somebody. There's so many people that I think him and Fannie Lou Hamer, and Angela Davis and Huey Newton, and even we hear all of these Martin Luther King Jr. speeches, or more to the point, we hear the one speech and the one part of the one speech repeatedly over and over again. But we don't hear all the other things that he said. Probably for a reason, because they weren't all, not even like kind or gentle, but like he definitely had a very firm stance and a
Letter from
very
a Birmingham
firm,
jail is tough stuff.
yeah, like he was somebody who was very aware of his place, not only in American history, but in terms of what his platform was, and being able to control it. Because I think a lot of people think about nonviolent protests and they just think that it was a lot of people standing around and not having emotions. And like Martin Luther King Jr. was angry and he was very upset, and you don't do the things that he did because things are fine and you feel fine about the world that you live in. You know what I mean? Like he was not shouting, you know, like Malcolm X and some others. But that doesn't mean that he wasn't angry, or that he wasn't, disgusted at the way that he and others were being treated. And I think James Baldwin is somebody who kind of rides that line between some of the more, emotional and intellectual tides, where he's somebody that I think was never afraid to tell people exactly not only how he felt, but how it was, how the world was. And I think he has a very he has a lot of great quotes, but the one that I think about, I'll sanitize it slightly, for this, but um, I mean, he's just talking about black people and the Negro, quote unquote, and how that's not him. Like, he's not a Negro. You know what I mean? Like, people put that label on him, but that's something that white people created. You know what I mean? That's an idea and a concept that was created by white people 400 years ago. When they needed a reason to enslave a group of people, and they needed an ideology and a concept to make that okay. And so he was talking about it in the 60s, where it's just like, well, that if that's not me, it says a lot about how you view people. You know what I mean? We're all kind of just reflections of each other in the world that we see. So if you have such a dire need to create this image and this fantasy of a whole group of people, what's the necessity of that, right? And so, if I'm not the Negro, then you must be it, because you're the one who so desperately needs that reality to be true, right? So I think that really applies to today, where you see so many people, even now, like we were just talking about, they can't wrap their heads around the ideas of white supremacy. They can't wrap their heads around the ideas of white privilege, and so they need to create anything and everything and all kinds of what ifs and loopholes and stuff to justify something that's illogical. Like, they need that so they can go about their day, whereas it's beyond just the general reality of we're all human beings, and we all get along, yada yada, whatever. But, like, when you look across religions and ethnicities and race and gender and sexuality and all of that stuff, there's good people, there's shitty people, there's people who are in between. And you looking at just one specific vague general idea of what makes a person is insane, right? You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, if I just looked at somebody, well, it's the Jane Elliott experiment. I don't know if you're familiar with her. She's like um she basically teaches white people about why they're racist. And she does an experiment called the blue-eyed brown hair experiment, where she gets a bunch of white people together, and she separates them by eye color and hair color. And then she starts to kind of just promote lies about, well, people with blue eyes are inherently smarter, better looking, deserving of more money, more status. And we all know that people with brown eyes are inferior, they're stupider, they tend to, be more violent. And just kind of, she states it as fact, like, it's not an opinion, this is the truth. And she kind of keeps, like, permeating these ideas throughout this group activity, and just watching the videos of just white people just breaking, because they're just like, what are you talking about? Like, that doesn't make any sense, but when when they're kind of faced with the craziness of just even that concept, like, I think it hits a lot of them that, like, oh, that is dumb. Like, why did I even think that?
Well, two things.
Oh, go
Sorry.
ahead.
Number one, I'm glad you referenced James Baldwin, because literally last night we were up pretty late and we watched I Am Not Your Negro, which if you need to see some James Baldwin footage, that's the thing to watch. It's very, very, very good. But yeah, like, white people are fragile in general. Like, I've seen so many people have meltdowns on social media just for being made fun of for being a quote Karen. Like, they can't handle it. But yeah, everything you're saying is totally accurate. And sorry, Brian, go ahead.
No, it's when I think about to touch on that, it's the whole white fragility thing is, I grew up with a dad who introduced me to the movie Blazing Saddles at a young age, which is nothing but, it's 90 minutes of making fun of white fragility. But I grew up with guys like Pryor and Paul Mooney, one of the greatest experience I've ever had is going to a Paul Mooney show. And if you don't know who he is, he's on Dave Chappelle. You can find him easily enough. But I think really I was very lucky to be able to work at Radio 1, to be a white guy in a very black space. And it was, all I heard was my friends, I'm going to the beach. I'm telling you, I'm going to Ocean City. I'm rolling a blunt. And they say to me, man, we don't get to do that. We don't get to smoke blunts on the way to the beach. It's very easy to, well, not easy. It's hard to ignore these things when you live with them, to hear comedians tell jokes from their perspective, and then just to hear your friends say it, and then if to ignore your friends when they're telling you the truth of their lives, white fragility. It's so much.
And I think that's what's so crazy about, say, like the Drew Brees situation, where this is a guy who works with a predominantly black, people, as the quarterback of a football team. He lives in a predominantly black city in New Orleans. And his whole response to everything was, well, yeah, but the flag, that, don't disrespect that. And I think it goes to show that even people who have a lot of black friends, or move in the black community, sometimes just they're not listening. I mean, like they're kind of, they've got the shield of like, yeah, but I work with all these black people, or like, I know this, or I'm married to a black person. I mean, even looking at Bill de Blasio right now, it's just like, okay, like clearly you marrying a black woman and having a black child did not really key you into the realities of being a black person in America. So it's wild to see so many people come out and just act like, yeah, well, because I have one black friend for 20 years that I or can speak for, where
I'm down.
yeah, and it's not even that, because I've been having conversations about allyship with people a lot this week, and it's not that nobody's demanding perfection, right? Like nobody's demanding that you be the upstanding ally 100% of the time, every day. But the idea of allyship is that you are constantly doing the work on your own, right? Like you can't copy my homework, right? Like I'm living the experience. So you can't just try to say, oh, well, Jordan said this or Jordan did that, and so I'll just kind of mimic and mirror what he does, because we're still moving in two different spaces, right? It's like me being an ally to, say, women or LGBTQ people. Part of that is, yes, listening to them, talking to them, understanding them, trying to build some understanding with them. Part of that is on the other end of the spectrum, when they're not around and they're not in the room, when they're not present to defend themselves or speak for themselves, I need to do that, right? I need to be the one where if I'm in a group of men and they're making sexist jokes, I need to say, hey guys, what are we doing right now? What's happening? If I'm in a room at my job, and somebody's saying something derogatory about an LGBTQ coworker, I need to say, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, what are you saying right now? Like that, shut up. Like we need to be allies in that way. So if you are looking at your black friends, your black coworkers, your black family members, and saying, what can I be doing right now? Part of that comes with just understanding, right? Like we are, again, human beings, and like going through a very emotional, traumatic moment. So like being there, but also giving space, all that stuff. It's always a balance, but also talking to the people that we can't talk to, right? I've been telling people, look, if black people had the power to end all the things that have been happening to us, we would have done that when colonizers landed on the west coast of Africa. We would have just said, nah, I don't want to get on that ship. Like it's not, if there was any point in history, we could have just been like, I don't like this and I want this to stop. Like we would have done that.
Why did they get on that ship voluntarily? It makes no sense.
So I think it's just, Yeah, I think it's just it's the understanding of, we've been doing that. I mean, this is we've been doing this work for a long time. We've been, different oops, my mic. Wait.
Uh-oh. While he's plugging back in, I just wanted to say, getting back to lip service and slacktivism, as with gushers and various other, social media platforms enable people to just sort of change their profile picture when they're not really actually doing anything, which is kind of why I never do that stuff, because it's just like, it's so empty. And getting back to Drew Brees and the NFL in general, talk about the biggest hypocrisy on earth. Like, any statements issued by any NFL representatives, like, we stand with the black community. I'm like, really? Got a guy named Colin Kaepernick who took a knee and you were like, nah, he's a pariah. I don't want to hire him. No, we need to respect the national anthem and yada, yada, yada. But yes.
But they came out and they apologized. They said they were wrong and they're sorry. So it's okay now.
But they never mentioned Cap's name.
They never mentioned Cap's name. They also still have a team called the Redskins, so you can't talk about racial, justice and inequity when you're still a very big, participant in all that stuff. But I mean, yeah, I think it's just a matter of, if you're trying to be helpful in the moment, it's a recognition of, one, this can't just be a moment. Like, this needs to be a continuing evolution of, us as a country, and from a perspective of social justice, of, policing, of all these things. So, like, don't go too hard right now, and say, like, December, you're just kind of like, remember we were all upset and in the streets? What was that about? I forgot why everybody was so angry in June.
That seems to be what happens over and over and over. And it's what's so frustrating to me is, like, it could be about racial issues or the climate change or guns or this and that and the other. It's like, we all get riled up for about 3 weeks, and then, within 3 weeks, everyone forgets. And I guess the difference right now, and I don't know if you guys agree with me, is that we're all, like, experiencing a layered quarantine, in fact, like, global pandemic. So everybody is just on edge to begin with. And this really, like, set off a powder keg that I'm hoping just continues to, go. But at the end of the day, it's like, we can change legislation, we can make new laws, regarding police and this and that and the other, but it's really about hearts and minds. And I don't know, you can post as much as you want on social media, but the guy out in Middle River who has that crab shack is still going to make shitty comments on Facebook.
Right. And I think it's about accountability, right? Like, even in terms of, say, police reform, in New York, they had outlawed chokeholds, right? And then that police officer choked Eric Garner to death. So it's not even like, even though it's against the law, it's not necessarily going to stop certain police officers from doing things, especially if you're not going to hold them accountable afterwards. So, there's definitely a lot of work to be done on that front. There's definitely a lot of work to be done in terms of even just general education, which is something I've been talking a lot about in terms of, the way that we learn history in this country. Like, first of all, America still has not on record apologized for slavery, which I think is, like, the easiest thing that you could do, is just say that was wrong and we were wrong. And that still has yet to happen. This week, they finally passed a lynching bill, and that was after Rand Paul tried to stonewall it, for the dumbest reason.
What was that? What was that?
Just it's insanity. So I think there's so much that
lynching isn't violence, it's a political statement, it's freedom of speech,
right?
Jesus Christ.
And just trying to, there's always going to be people, I think, who because it comes from a place of privilege, and it comes from a place of almost willful ignorance in terms of just the knowledge of the things that have occurred in this country, and kind of how we got to where we are. I think a lot of people, think about say the Civil War, and they're just like, yeah, well, you know, Lincoln wanted to free the slaves, and they didn't want to free the slaves, so we got into a big fight about it. And it's like, well, no, you know, the South was going to like stop being part of the country. You know, they were going to recede from the Union, and so they had all the money because they were producing all the cotton and the tobacco and the sugar and all of that stuff. So if they had separated from America, then, you know, it would have been a whole thing. So that was the main reason. And then on top of that, yeah, I guess freeing the slaves probably not a bad, you know, like
it's a good
to do after that. Well, and even the act of freeing the slaves was like, well, you know, we've been fighting this war, so like now I'm gonna do the ultimate fuck you and just take your labor force away, you know. So now what are you gonna do? And so there's so much in terms of just like the general narrative of history that we learn in school, and even learning about, you know, we learn about a little bit of Martin Luther King Jr. We don't really learn about Malcolm X at all. Nobody talks about the Black Panthers, you know, and there's so many. Nobody talks about Angela Davis or Fannie Lou Hamer or all the women in the Black, you know, civil rights movement. We don't learn any LGBTQ history. We don't learn any indigenous history. We don't learn any, you know, like so much of what this country is and how we got to where we got to. You know, it's just kind of whitewashed over.
You learn about, I think is it Ella Fitzgerald at the Washington Monument, at the Lincoln Memorial, but you don't hear about Hannah Simone denouncing the United States. You know, it's
I mean, you don't.
Nina Simone.
Nina Simone, thank you. What I said, Hannah.
You don't even learn. I mean, you don't learn about the fact that the Philadelphia Police Department dropped a bomb.
A bomb.
on a house of Black revolutionists. Like that was, you think about like you know, David Koresh in Waco, and like that whole 50-something day standoff, you know, where they were doing everything they could to not, you know, have it end in, you know, bloodshed or whatever. And then, you know, some Black people who just were being loud and talking about, you know, revolution in a Philadelphia neighborhood. I think the only way to get them out of that house is just to drop a bomb on them.
The first 10 minutes of Watchmen, you know, Black Wall Street.
Yeah, and people were like, did they just make that up for the show? Is that a real thing? You know?
I'll be completely honest. I thought it was made up, and then I learned all about it after the fact. And since we're on I mean, this is like a thread running throughout the show, but like things you ought to be watching and or listening to. There's a podcast called Stuff You Should Know, which lays out all of the details of the Tulsa Massacre. And you should listen to it because it is absolutely bonkers. It is crazy. Yeah. Especially what I mean, obviously I didn't know anything about this situation, but the idea that these wealthy Black people, many of which were like World War I veterans, or maybe even they were Army vets of some variety, were setting up like sniper outposts to protect themselves. And it's just like the logistics of all of what was going on were absolutely insane. And it started with a person who accidentally touched someone in an elevator.
And they used airplanes. They dropped bombs from airplanes, and then what blows my mind is that people in Tulsa didn't know about this until Watchmen came out. Like they just wiped it from the history book.
They wiped it from the history books until like the mid '90s or something like that. I mean, it's oh my god. Yeah, there's so much to unpack, like, and we just don't have enough time. So that's kind of what I was talking about off mic, and I probably will talk about, you know, elsewhere in this podcast, is building a sort of like an ongoing compendium, a link list of things that, you know, white people should probably watch. Episode 1 of the Watchmen season 1, and listen to that podcast about the Tulsa Massacre, and I Am Not Your Negro, and 2 episodes of Trial by Media, which is on Netflix, one of which details Bernard Goetz, the subway vigilante, air quotes, that the NRA like embraced because he shot 4 Black teens because he thought he was going to get mugged, and is unapologetic about it. And in his testimony before court literally said that the solution to the crime problem is to clean the streets of all the N-words and Hispanic people. It's just absolutely crazy.
All right, well, because we've touched on comics, there is no easy transition here.
No
Yeah.
sound effect for this one.
No easy transition. Jordan, you're writing Aquaman.
Yeah, I am doing that. I've got 2 issues of Aquaman coming out in August and July,
That is,
or August and September.
I mean, that's amazing, right?
Yeah, it's just this whole time, right? Like, you know, even before all of this happened, you know, when simpler times and coronavirus was all we had to worry about. Um, you know, I was getting this news about like, yeah, you know, like we want you to come and do, you know, these 2 issues of Aquaman and, you know, write about Aqualad / Jackson Hyde, who is the I don't know if he's necessarily the sidekick of Aquaman, but he's kind of like he's learning under Aquaman. And he's this black gay kid who kind of has similar powers to Aquaman and you know, some of the other Atlanteans. And I was like, wow, you know, like it's on one hand a dream come true to finally like write for DC Comics. On the other hand, global pandemic, like
Right.
comics are shut down for several months, like just kind of in this weird limbo space, but everything is starting to slowly come back. Those issues are slated to come out. So yeah, I'm very, very excited about it.
Now, is Aquaman someone you've always had a connection to, or I mean, is this an Aquaman story, or is this a Jackson Hyde story?
This is primarily a Jackson Hyde story, and it's interesting because Jackson is, if people are familiar with, say, like Young Justice, which is the DC cartoon that was on Cartoon Network and is now on the DC streaming service, you know, Aqualad is one of the main characters, and he's Black Manta's son, which is Aquaman's main villain. And the same is true in the comics. He's the son of it's a weird kind of messy comic history where he's the son of Black Manta. Black Manta killed well, it's kind of the reverse, right? Aquaman killed Black Manta's father just in a fit of rage and like not really paying attention to what he was doing, and then Black Manta you know, is partly responsible for Aquaman's father's death. So there's a whole kind of weird history connecting them to each other, and now you've got Black Manta's son who's kind of teaming up with Aquaman. And so there's a lot of connections to draw from. So
Soap operas with fistfights.
yeah, that's all it is, man. You know, I like Aquaman. Like, I was never like an Aquaman fan, you know, straight up. I mean, Adventures like the Justice League cartoons, you know, like Super Friends originally, and then going into like the Justice League cartoon and Justice League Unlimited, and even like Batman Brave and the Bold. Like, I've always been like, oh, Aquaman's not the worst. And then like Jeff Johns' run on Aquaman kind of like reset the character and kind of brought him into a different light. So you know, Aquaman the movie, a different story, interesting
I didn't see it.
interpretation.
It's troublesome.
So
yeah.
I have my favorite Aquaman moment of all time is, I think it's Grant Morrison's JLA #2 or #3.
Yeah.
And the JLA is fighting the HyperClan, and if you don't know who the HyperClan end up being, I'm not telling you. But Aquaman's like the bad guy says, Aquaman, what are you gonna do? You're the guy who talks to fish. And then Aquaman says, yeah, but I can also talk to the fish parts of your brain, like those lower like level, you know, wherever parts of your brain's evolved from fish. And I said, I'm just gonna give you a seizure and shut you down, and then does it. And
Wait,
then,
he can do that?
cool. It's like Indy just shooting the sword guy. It's you know, it's like one of the coolest moments ever.
What,
So I mean, Aquaman's cool.
what are the other? So because I don't really pay attention to Aquaman. What is his list of abilities? Is it just talking to fish, or does he have like water telekinesis or something.
It's a lot of weird things that I think have evolved over a period of time, because I think initially, he is half Atlantean, so theoretically, he has the ability to basically just breathe underwater. Like, he doesn't technically have gills, like they don't show it, but whatever his physiology, however that's evolved, like he can breathe underwater, he can go to like, very extreme depths without, any kind of suit, like his body is built for that.
Being crushed,
Um,
right?
yeah, like he's strong. He's not Superman strong, obviously, but he's like maybe a step below that. I think like he could lift a car, I mean, he can like, he's got that ability. He doesn't necessarily have to, be in water. I don't know. The water doesn't give him more power,
But
but
does he still need to get wet every hour?
I don't think that's true either. I think he's obviously got a preference to be close to the ocean.
Sure.
And he's got like they'll give him different things from time to time. Like Peter David cut his hand off and gave him like a hook for a hand
Oh yeah.
for a while, and like sometimes he'll have like tridents that do different things.
He had a water
they've-
hand.
yeah, like they've amended his ability to communicate with fish to be less of a, like, I can like straight up like talk to fish and have a conversation with them, to be more like I can communicate with them on like a very primal level. Like I can I
It
can
was cool when he had two dolphin friends.
yeah. Like he can just kind of ask them for help, basically. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
He can
using
communicate to them
dolphins
that-
as water skis is like on my bucket list for sure.
for sure, yeah.
I think, and DC is kind of moving this way. It's the comparisons almost never made, but I think a really interesting, only because I think the theory of the character, it never really works. Aquaman is very similar to Black Panther in that he's almost not he shouldn't be a superhero. He should be like this monarch because he's king of the oceans. He's king of the seven seas. Like he should always be above like bank robbers, and he just never quite gets there.
Yeah, I think there's definitely potential for, and they've kind of touched the surface of this, of say like a Game of Thrones-esque Aquaman adventure where, I mean, he is the king of Atlantis sometimes. Currently he is his significant other Mara is the queen of Atlantis right now and the sole monarch of Atlantis. And there's Atlantis is very strange, like one of the things you find as a comic
Title
book
of the
writer.
episode.
Yeah. As a comic book writer, specifically doing superhero stuff, like there's so much just weird research you have to do, like just so many like references that you have to check in terms of like, well, what is this, and like how do these things work? So I've had to do a lot of like inference on Atlantean politics and history, and
Do
just
you
trying to
have
figure out.
multiple Atlantean species, like the Superman's girlfriend, Lori Lamaris, mermaid Atlantean, versus the two-legged, Aquaman Atlantean?
Well, so I mean, if I can get nerdy for a second, I guess, and kind of
I
explain
just said
all
Lori
of
Lamaris.
it.
No, please don't.
So Atlantis in DC lore is basically like the original Atlantis, right? Which was, a surface city, and then it sunk to the bottom of the ocean, and then kind of broke off into several different cities. So there's Atlantis Prime, which is where Aquaman is from, and then there's Zebel, which is where Mara is from, and that's kind of a weird pocket dimension in the Bermuda Triangle.
Okay.
And then there's like the Trench, who are in the Jeff Johns run, and then we're in the Aquaman movie, and they're like the Atlanteans that got the short end of the stick and just sunk to the very bottom of the ocean, like in the Mariana Trench. So they turned into like monstrous fish people to survive. And then there's allegedly other sections of Atlantis that are throughout the ocean and other places. And so, like there's even now, right? Like Kelly Sue DeConnick, who's writing it, has introduced like a separate nation with Aquaman's brother Orm, um, and it's like the refugees of all these cities, like all the like you were talking about, like kind of the mer people or like the freaky weird people who aren't necessarily like quote unquote proper Atlanteans. Like they've all gone off with Orm to form their own nation. Uh, so like there's a lot again. Like Aquaman is rife with political intrigue. Like there's always a lot of just kind of stuff going on that could be built up more. I think it's hard because like with a lot of superheroes, like Aquaman isn't just in Aquaman, right? Like he's in the Justice League and he's doing all this other stuff. So it's kind of like, how do you maintain all of this without breaking the illusion of like, yeah, but in Justice League, Aquaman's in space right now. So like, what was he doing, in this whole like political debate? But yeah, I'd love to see something like that. I think Kelly Sue is doing some interesting things right now in terms of maybe kind of moving in that direction in terms of like bringing up um the future of Atlantean politics and kind of different ways to explore that, because like you're saying, it's weird that he's a king but also like has to answer to Superman,
You're right.
like it's kind of
Batman will be his dick to him,
yeah, it's like you're not even the mayor of Gotham, like you're just a citizen, like I am a king of a whole nation.
Can Superman swim?
Theoretically, I guess
Does
he's
he
got a
have
lot
to?
of weird. Yeah, he's got weird abilities too. Or I think,
Or you mean like flying is not weird?
well, I mean,
life's normal.
yeah, I think it's more like specifically the Silver Age comics where
My
it was,
favorites.
yeah, it was I guess proposed that Superman's hair is like as thick as steel, so
Yeah.
he can't get a haircut. Like he has to like, yeah, he has to use like his laser vision and bounce it off a mirror to like
The
cut
shave.
his beard. Yeah.
That was the plot point in Superman 4. It was like a piece of his hair was holding up like an anvil or something, and Lex Luthor cut it with like
Bolt cutters.
bolt cutters to clone him. Oh God, man, that movie. But so we're running out of time here. I wanted to give you a belated congratulations, Jordan, for Elk Mountain, which
Thank you.
part 1 got finished last summer.
Yeah.
Do you have any plans for a part 2?
Yeah, I think I am looking at trying to find somebody to help us publish it. I think we've got it all kind of ready to go. It's just a matter of, do we want to come back again to Kickstarter, and try and do it that way, or do we want to try and find a place to give us a little bit more support in terms of not only the publishing side, but also just the distribution side of trying to get it out to a larger audience. So
Yeah.
Boy, if Vertigo still existed, I think it'd be a.
I was gonna say, when you go to the
sell.
DC Comics office, just like slip them a note.
yeah, I think maybe there's a way I can kind of get Jim Lee's attention and kind of just slip it on his desk.
Well,
Well,
especially since it is a story about an immigrant. I love using the phrase now more than ever, but I think you're poised.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's still very much so a relevant story, and even now, people are still locked up. ICE didn't go away. So I mean, that's still a big issue that we have to deal with as a country. So hopefully, yeah, we're able to get that out in some way, shape, or form. I think our plan is to do it, by the end of the year, whether that's self-publishing or whether we can get a little help on the publishing side with a bigger publisher.
And I also want to mention that you can be found in Bitch Planet Triple Feature.
Yep.
You mentioned Kelly Sue DeConnick. Listen, guys, Bitch Planet is a very cool comic. It's a blaxploitation lady prison film with an ultra feminist bent. I mean, it is really good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, if you're into like some of the more grindhouse
Yeah.
films or some of those movies that are like, everything is, it's extreme, but with a sense of humor. There's a sense of parody to it. I think she references RoboCop a lot in terms of just kind of how, RoboCop is like, there's a social message to RoboCop, but it's
Yeah.
also like just a crazy parody of like, America pushed to the extreme. And I think this is kind of that, the patriarchy pushed to the extreme. So yeah, I mean, it's I still, every time I look at that, I'm like, I did that. I wasn't there. So I would definitely recommend that as well.
All right, well, Jordan, thank you for joining us. Guys, go out and get Aquaman 62 and 63. Get them from your local comic shop. They are in desperate need of your dollars. This was great. Jordan, thanks so much.
Yeah, no, thank you guys. And yeah, everybody who's out there, protesting or either, at home trying to do what they can. I know for me personally, it's tricky because coronavirus is still a thing, and I have people that I'm close to who are, kind of immunocompromised, and I don't necessarily want to risk their health as well. So I mean, it's all a tricky balance that we're kind of going through. But just be safe, be aware. There's still crazy things happening on the street, and I want everybody to be safe, but also continue to kind of push forward as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jordan, we'll have you back on anytime you've got a project to plug. Thank you very much for being here.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Peace out.
Cool. I'll send you the link when it's all finished put together.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. Thank you guys so much for having me.
No, this is great. Thank you. I think it worked out perfectly. When this is all over, we'll get a drink.
Okay.
One of these days.
Yeah. Before you go, I do want to hear, because I am curious. I don't know. I mean, I'm not even going to assume that you speak to Randy anymore.
Oh, I still got my comics there. I did not go in this week. I assume he's losing his fucking mind.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out like what. So, from your experience as somebody who ran a comic book shop, when you see what DC is doing and the potential of what maybe other publishers might do, maybe not necessarily going with the same people that they're going with, but separating from Diamond, does that make you nervous? Does that make you feel like that's good?
I never had any troubles with Diamond. Everybody who's like, Diamond sucks. I'm like, no, not really.
Yeah.
Like, maybe I was too small of an operation to get the shitty service. So
I wonder too, because I mean, we're right there. I mean, they're just a couple. They're up in Hutt Valley.
Right.
So it's like, we're kind of in the prime position for them in terms of service. I don't know what it's like in, say, like California or
exactly.
other places.
But I don't. It makes me, when Jeppy was he was a distributor first and a retailer second. I worry about retailer first, distributor second.
Yeah.
If Jeppy has a store and he's giving himself free comics, I don't give a fuck. He's also distributing everything and whatever.
Yeah.
If they have stores and they're getting deals while distributing comics, I think that's problematic. Maybe? I don't know.
It's very strange because I don't know how. I think I just need to do more research into how it works necessarily, because between, I guess it's Midtown who's running the one, and then there's another comic shop, I think, in Texas.
Yeah, Luna or whatever it is.
Yeah, running the other one, and I'm like, I think I'm curious as to how it actually operates in terms of, DC is going to send them, the books,
Here's my
to
other
distribute.
question. Why isn't DC just sending people books?
That's what I was wondering. Like, I know, yeah, well, or, um, the press release was like, these two places are where you go for your periodicals, but then, Penguin is going to be distributing our trades.
So here's what I
Right.
actually think. In 18 months, there are no monthly DC Comics. They're going to go straight trades.
Hmm.
Straight OGNs.
Which I think there's so much, and we've had this conversation before, just in terms of there's so many comics that, why is there a Chuck Dixon Bane comic? Like, who's buying that, as a single issue? If you wanted to sell it as a graphic novel, like an original graphic novel, or if you wanted to sell it digital only or digital first and then as a graphic novel, I think
What I think is, if you'll have 5 Shonen Jump style. You'll have your Batman Shonen Jump. You'll have your Justice League Shonen Jump, where you'll have an Aquaman adventure, a Flash adventure, a Cyborg adventure. You'll have your Batman Shonen Jump. You'll have, Super. Did I already say Superman? But that's how it
yeah,
will work. If you want a Justice League Dark, you'll have a Wonder Woman story 1 month where she's fighting monsters, and the next month you'll have Batgirl versus
yeah.
who knows.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I wonder, like, if their plan is to severely cut down on the single issues that they have each month, which probably is not a bad idea. You don't need all of these other things, every month. Definitely don't need 50 something comics a month.
But what if you were spending $50 a month on 5 or 6 different, thick,
Yeah,
with your, which would have your 50 comics. I don't know.
yeah. So yeah, we'll see. I'm curious to see what's going to happen. Specifically because I was like, oh, again, it's like, great, I've got these 2 issues coming out. Oh, all these stores are saying I don't want DC Comics anymore.
Yeah, I know. I gotta watch what happens, but
It'll all fix itself, because again, like, you're not going to stop getting Batman if you're a store. Like, that's insane. So
yeah.
I think everybody's going to figure it out. Will they get as many DC Comics as they got before?
No.
I don't know, but
No, and I wouldn't be surprised if they except for Batman, go strict subscriber.
yeah.
I don't know. I know these people don't want to listen to this anymore.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys. And yeah, I'll talk to you guys soon.
Yeah, I'll send you the link in the next couple of days.
All right.
All right, thanks, Jordan.
Bye.
Adios.
All right, I'm gonna smoke real quick.
Okay. And I guess